In 2026, there's a new way to grow a telehealth brand. Ad costs keep rising, and GLP-1 is no longer enough to make you stand out. So the brands still relying on the old playbook will struggle to compete. After working with and auditing over 50 telehealth brands, I've seen exactly what the fastest growing brands are doing differently. And in this video, I'll break down the 3 key rules for scaling a telehealth brand in today's market so you can lower CAC, increase LTV, and build something patients actually want to stick with. Let's start with rule number 1. Now, point number 1, the best way to increase your LTV in 2026 is something that most brands neglect, which is your lifecycle marketing. So I'm talking about email marketing, SMS marketing, app notifications, etc. And the reason these work is not for what you think. In telehealth, the game is different, and most brands don't understand the impact of lifecycle marketing in this industry. Because it's not just about getting the first purchase. It's rarely, or it's super hard, at least in this space right now, to be front-end profitable with, let's say, GLP-1s. So telehealth is more about keeping your patients for as long as possible, not just a one-time purchase of some bamboo socks or some type of clothing or something. And one of the best ways to set the stage for a good retention that I'm using as example here of just a fraction of what you can do with these lifecycle marketing channels is the post-purchase onboarding flow, which triggers when the first order has been completed. And the goal of this email is literally to set the people up for success. This is the start of the flow. And obviously during this flow, you're going to be doing much more other communication as well. But what you want to do in this flow, I think this summarizes pretty well. You want to educate the patients on how to get the best results from the treatment and set the expectations straight so they know exactly what and when to expect in terms of results, for example. You want to include tips, guides, FAQs, patient success stories, appointment reminders, side effect management, all this kind of value that you can give to them. And here you can see examples of time tracking charts, weight tracking charts, GLP-1 friendly recipe that keeps you on track and keeps you healthy. If you have some sort of an app, for example, for your brand, you can even link them to the app where they can track their weight and time tracking and everything. So even more, next level going from this one. This flow in general, the post-purchase onboarding flow, it's the longest and most important retention flow. It can run for months using different types of automated patient support check-ins to proactively help patients and keep them satisfied. And it can also include loyalty incentives for people who have stayed in the treatment for long enough, etc., etc. It can push people to community. It can notify them about potential events that you're hosting, etc., etc. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with it, but the goal is to empower people on the treatment to get the best results out of it as possible. Of course, email still decreases CAC tremendously as well. So it's not just a retention channel, specifically through things like the questionnaire abandonment flow, which is probably the highest leverage conversion driving flow in email marketing for telehealth brands, because it's a big decision to buy medication online, and therefore patients need a bridge to get over the hump. And there's a lot of data behind this, but I think, for example, some of the biggest telehealth brands are reporting that up to 30% of the total conversions, front-end conversions, are coming from so-called recovered partials, which means people who came to the funnel, they dropped off or abandoned the quiz, and then you were eventually able to retarget them to get them to finish the quiz and end up becoming a patient. And that's exactly what the questionnaire abandonment flow does, because it triggers for patients that doesn't finish the questionnaire, but they have already started it. And what you can do with this flow, obviously you want to have a lot of different emails in it, and this is just one example of one piece of the flow, but this is what we've seen work quite well for a lot of brands, which is this type of plain text style from an actual employee of the team, but it's an automated email just masked as kind of manual reach out from the team member, and it's sent. They mention their name, they have the signature at the end of that person. What else do you do with this email and with this flow? You send reminders that emphasize value and address objections. You have FAQ, you answer their most biggest objections, their biggest questions. You try to get them over the fence, removing all the hesitation behind the potential purchase. And you link them back to their pre-filled questionnaire with a magic link. This is an important part here. If people have been going through the questionnaire for minutes and minutes and then they drop off, if they have started all over again, this is quite a lot of friction and it reduces conversions. But if you're able to build a dynamic link that gets them back to the pre-filled questionnaire in the exact spot where they left off from with the progress saved, that's a much better option, and that's usually a good optimization to do on that side. This flow and this email also includes educational content or social proof, and optionally also some sort of an incentive to complete the step and get people to start on the treatment. Now, this is often the highest ROI and most impactful flow for conversion driving with email marketing and SMS marketing. And you can see here one of our case studies that heavily relies on building these type of flows for one of our customers. So if you're interested, you have access to this board because you're watching the video. You can click it from here and open and see for yourself. Now, point number 2, the treatment itself is not the moat, because everyone sells the same compound, and unless you're Novo Nordisk, you probably won't create a magic new formula. So how should you compete then is the question. Now, price is usually not the way, because it's a loser's game if you end up not competing with that. Delivery time is also pretty hard because there's all of these huge competitors that can eat you for lunch. Then what leaves, what is still an option here is pretty much focusing on the brand and the benefits that you can offer. And this is the holy grail in 2026 with the big competition in this market. Let's take Hims for an example. Their biggest seller and hook offer is mainly GLP-1s still at this stage and to this date, but really it's a lot more than that when the customers actually get into the door. The back end is where they make the patient stick through parallel treatments and benefits. So they offer a lot of different treatment categories that they are able to cross-sell to the patients that are already active. They offer a benefits program for their customers and patients that offer, affiliate deals for different, complementary services that allow people to get better results. And they offer all of this on the back end to get people to stay for longer, increase their LTV, and make more profit as a business. This makes their product and their treatment extremely sticky because if patients churn, they basically don't just lose the treatment itself, which is GLP-1s as an example, they also lose the benefits that have become part of their daily lives and the rituals and the routines and the habits. And that's what makes them stay with Hims over, let's say, if they would be able to find something cheaper, overnight switching to that other provider, because it's much more than just the treatment itself at this stage. Now, this, I believe, is the future with telehealth because it isn't just medical e-commerce, it's the next generation of healthcare. And that's what you need to look into, because if you don't have the potential for an LTV like that, it's going to be super, super tough to compete in the long run against these big players. Now, rule number 3 is the sales questionnaires. In 2026, because of how competitive the market is, you need a conversion optimized questionnaire and you need to be optimizing it over time, all the time, iterating, testing, improving, and so on. Because if not, your CAC will simply be too high and it's going to be super hard to manage to succeed. And this comes together with the flows like questionnaire abandonment flow. With what this does is basically the same as the questionnaire abandonment flow, getting people to convert at a higher rate and thus decreasing your CAC. Now, what are the principles behind the conversion optimized questionnaire? There's first of all the principle of congruence, which is super important, which means that from the add to quiz, your patient needs to know they're in the right place for their condition. So you can see an example again. There's an ad for hair loss for Hims, and there's a quiz that matches that specific type of customer. So the congruence here stays from hair loss customer, hair loss lead, from ad to questionnaire, and also to the emails after that. Same for weight loss. There's specific ad and creative and copy, and specific quiz for those type of people. Then there's ED, same thing, low T, same thing. So this congruency is super important to make sure that people actually stay on the funnel. There's no friction, it's streamlined, and they actually end up converting as well. Now there's commitment slides, which are basically these questions that are necessary for diagnosis, but increase emotional commitment. So what would reaching your goal weight mean for you? Because of my weight, select all the statements that apply to you. Has anyone noticed or commented on your hair loss? These type of questions, they increase the emotional commitment and keep people progressing through the questionnaire because it kind of emphasizes the pain points that they already have, but also it provides you data if you're collecting the data into your backend to use for segmenting your marketing content like emails. So if somebody tells them specific information to you here, you can target them specifically. So if they want to have more energy, then you focus on that angle in the emails. If they want to feel better in their body, you can focus on that angle, etc. Now, sales slides is another thing that questionnaires usually have when they're conversion optimized. So you can add these slides that are basically purely for selling the solution and your brand. For Keeps, here's a good example from like a social proof slide. There's like before after images with a quick testimonial and like their review star rating 9, month 0, month 6. Our members see results in as little as 6 months. So this type of sales slides. And then there can be also educational sales slides. Like here's an example. 83% of Americans are not the way they'd like to be, which is based on this national representative survey, etc. Now, point number 4, if you don't build a brand, you lose. Because in 2026, it's no longer just about GLP-1s. Everyone has access to many of the same treatments, and direct response is great, but branding eventually beats it. And I want to talk about something that I think is relevant here, which is the New Balance approach. And so from 2014 to 2020, the revenue was stagnant, pretty much going from 3.3 billion. They went a little bit higher and then they got back to 3.3. Now, after that, or at that point, they got Chris Davis to become the CMO of the brand. And what they did at this point, basically their revenue has gone from 3.4 billion to now 9.2 billion in 2025. And they have had multiple consecutive years of 2-digit growth. And what causes that is pretty much the massive shift on the approach that they took after he became CMO. So he changed the company's advertising budget from 70% direct response and 30% branding to pretty much the opposite. So only like 30% direct response, 70% branding. And the results here obviously take time. It's a long-term game. It's not something that changes immediately. It's actually probably kind of like you invest into the future, but at the initial stage, you probably see a little bit of a dip in revenue if you go from direct response to branding focus. But by 2025, the revenue, like I mentioned, hit 9.2 billion, which is the record, up to 19% higher than the previous year. And it was New Balance's 5th straight year of double-digit growth. Now, how do you build a telehealth brand following these type of principles here? Well, branding in general means associating your brand with things your target audience already likes, and you need to make sure you got that down. So I'm giving you 3 big examples here. First of all, Hims and Hers. They made TV ads communicating to the broader market that top-of-the-line healthcare shouldn't be only for the rich. The wealth gap is a health gap. And this is basically the kind of communication and the positioning that they used. Then Roe actually went with hiring Serena Williams to represent them as an influencer, and pairing your brand with the people your audience already likes gives it an obvious boost as well. And this is another approach compared to what Hims did. And then there's another one, Keeps, which basically built its brand with YouTubers and podcasters its audience already liked and listened to. So really unique approach in this way. It advertised on Theo Von and a lot of other podcasts, and this is how they were able to build their brand into the biggest hair loss provider, hair loss treatment provider in the United States. Now, if you're interested in learning more about how the biggest players in the space build brands and operate, then click the video on screen right now to see what I learned after analyzing enhanced games. And I'll hope you see you in that one.